Okay, hello and welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Network webinar series. Today we are joined by Karen Martin alongside Peter Hines. So today Karen will be speaking on the topic of clarity, the essence of lean management. Just a bit about the Enterprise Excellence Network and who we are before we start the webinar. So the network is for senior lean leaders based in Europe, was founded by Professor Peter Hines, and includes quarterly benchmarking workshops at best practice and award-winning host sites. These are commonly held over 2 days with topics very much driven by our members. If you would like to find out more, you can visit our website or email myself. Both of these details will be sent in the follow-up emails. So just a bit of the functionality into the webinar. It will be a presentation by Karen to begin with, and then we'll have around 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to type your questions into the question tab, where Peter Hines will then deliver these to Karen. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Professor Peter Hines. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Emma, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're listening to us from. It's very nice to welcome you all to this this session. I think this is about the 10th in our series, something like that. And some people have asked, how do we choose the different speakers? And I think my simple answer to that is, probably like most of you, we go to many conferences and see speakers. These are the people that I would go and listen to. So Karen is one of those people that we come across each other probably about every 2 or 3 years at one of the conferences over in the US, and I always try and listen in to some of the work that she's doing, and probably we've stretched back in doing that more than 10 years now in terms of some of her earlier work. So to introduce Karen, she's president of the global consulting firm TKMG and president and founder of the TKMG Academy, which is a leading authority on business performance improvement, problem solving, and lean management systems. Her clients have included Fortune 500 companies in nearly every industry and government agency at local, state, and federal levels. She's also a multiple award-winning author of Clarity First and 4 other books, and is a highly rated speaker. So she'll provide some further information about her contact information at the end of her talk. So Karen, I'm fascinated to hear more about clarity, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for everything that you've contributed to the lean community. It's just wonderful to see the continuity and the quality of the work that you've done over the years, and so thank you for that. We need more voices, and you're a good, strong one, so thank you. So hello, everyone. I echo Peter's greeting of good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's wonderful to be talking with you about my favorite subject, clarity. So what happened, a little bit about my journey, is that I initially wrote a book called The Outstanding Organization, which was book number 3. And when I was getting feedback from readers on the 4 conditions or 4 requirements, foundational requirements for outstanding performance in an organization, clarity was one of those 4 foundational conditions. And clarity got so much attention, and I got very passion-filled emails back from folks saying, oh my goodness, pained emails actually. I had no idea how much the lack of clarity was dragging me down and my team down and our performance down. And I even had one gentleman send a very emotional letter about how he cried reading that chapter because he just didn't understand the root of his pain. And I knew at that point that there was something that I had to explore far more deeply about clarity. At the same time, I was starting to connect the dots with all of my years with lean management practices and seeing that really what lean management is all about is achieving clarity. Every single element, and I'll go through some of these in the webinar, but every single element is designed to become clear. And one of the things that I've studied for decades now, in being in lean, since 2000 is when I made the transition from total quality management into lean management, there's resistance, a lot of resistance in a lot of organizations to lean practices. And when I, think about why is that? Why is there so much resistance? I mean, it makes so much sense. Like, why would you not do lean? I started realizing that a lot of it has to do with fear, and fear of the clarity that lean brings to the table. So, I tend to think about psychology a lot, organizational psychology and individual psychology. And I do think that there's something even more than I've already mined about clarity. There's more to be mined in figuring out how do we break through resistance, because people are sometimes very afraid of clarity. And what can we do about that? So I invite you after this webinar to email me, link with me on LinkedIn. You can tweet with me on Twitter if you want to, and let's keep this conversation going, because there's a lot more to be discovered, I think, around clarity. Here's an example. So as I started writing the book, I moved from San Diego to Santa Monica, and I had lived in Santa Monica prior to that, California. And everywhere how when you decide that you're going to buy a white car, suddenly every car on the highway is a white car. Well, everywhere I went, I saw this ambiguity, the lack of clarity. And I finally unpacked my boxes in Santa Monica and went to the grocery store. And I went around the block about 4 times before I finally found a parking place that was open. And this was what was at the parking place, this sign, or the series of signs. I got out of my car and I literally sat there for, 5 minutes reading these signs, trying to figure out, can I park here or can I not park here? And this began kind of the journey that I spent in the 2 years of writing the book on looking at just how much lack of clarity there is out there and what it does to us individually and as organizations. So this is a fun little example. I mean, hopefully after today's webinar, you'll start getting obsessed with clarity like I am, and you'll start seeing, man, it is rare to have clarity, and we can do so much to help bring that into our lives and the lives of our colleagues and our leadership teams and our work teams that we oversee, which is very beneficial for everyone. And the reason why it is so beneficial is that ambiguity, the opposite of clarity, is icky. It feels bad when you can't quite figure things out. It just brings a whole level of concern or fear, anxiety into any kind of a situation. It slows you down a whole lot to not have crisp clarity on everything. It's frustrating because it takes a lot of work to seek clarity, and it's expensive. Every single time you've got ambiguity in an organization, you are spending extra labor effort and extra mental psychic effort to figure things out. And so being able to get very sensitized to when you've got ambiguity and when you've got clarity and how that feels psychologically is part of the journey to becoming free, which clarity does. Clarity is a liberation kind of state to be in. Now, it may not be great news. Being clear about something that's bad news is painful, but wouldn't it be better to have that level of clarity, even if it's painful, so you know what to do with it? When you don't know what's really the truth of a situation, you don't know what to do about it. So classic problem solving, first you have to understand the problem. First you have to have clarity before all else. Now, I would like you to take a quick glance at your monitors, whatever you're watching this on, and tell me how many dots you see. All right, or tell yourselves how many dots you see, since you're not unmuted. Most of you are probably seeing 3, 4, maybe, and they might move. So this is a lattice work that was put forth by an illusionist in Japan. I'll give you his name in just a second here. And it just goes to show how much that, to me, this represents noise. The lattice work represents organizational noise. And it could be a conversation where there's this lack of clarity and the conversation's meandering. It can be not understanding how you're actually performing as an organization or department. It could be any number of things, but there's a lot of noise. And what you've got to do is get rid of the noise. And that's what lean management practices actually do. They actually help get rid of the noise in a profound way. And so we have to start, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, is confronting the fact that a lot of people are uncomfortable with the clarity of seeing the 12 dots. But yet it's where you have to go. It's liberating on all fronts. So Akiyoshi Kitaoka, I think is how you pronounce it, is a Japanese professor who does all kinds of great illusion work. You can follow him on Twitter or LinkedIn, and he has genius visuals of these incredible optical illusions. So check him out. So we need to get rid of that lattice work. So what is clarity? You know, it took a while for me to figure out how to define it. I mean, the easy definition is the opposite of ambiguity. Another easy definition is it's the truth. But there are elements to clarity, and clarity is not the same as certainty. They are very different. So you will never have certainty in life. It's just not possible to get certainty all the time. And boy, right now we are seeing this with COVID, like not knowing when it's going to end. We're not going to get that level of clarity until it's here. And so certainty and uncertainty, you know, are just normal. Clarity is a man-made, or the lack thereof is a man-made thing, a people-made thing. So to me, clarity has three elements. First of all, it's coherent. So everything sticks together. And there's not this like, well, wait a minute. He said that, but his body language I read that. Or, you know, that kind of like this incoherence is when things don't match up. It's precise. So I just was on a client call right before this webinar, and we were looking at a value stream map that they had produced, and I was asking a lot of questions that were quantification kinds of questions. And, you know, almost every answer was a lot, a long time, a little, not so great quality, you know, those kinds of things. And I'm a bit of a wordsmith, and so I was like, what does that mean? What's a lot? Is a lot 2 hours? Is a lot 2 weeks? What's a lot? What's a little? And little by little, you get people sensitized to how imprecise they're being, and clarity requires precision. And then finally, elegance. So I think of elegance, like mainly in the software design world. Elegance is when, as a user, it's like click, 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 you know, you just are flying. Elegance in process is being able to see what's really happening and working closer and closer toward true flow. So you have to have high degrees of clarity in order to do that, but you also need to have some degree of elegance in order to have clarity. So it's kind of a iterative loop. Now, one of the things that I have found over the years is that humility and curiosity are absolute requirements in order to have clarity. You cannot run around with a lot of arrogance and ego driving everything and get clarity, because the ego will interfere with the ability to find the facts and find the truth. Same with curiosity. Curiosity is what allows you to dig deeper and to pursue clarity. So you have to have that level of curiosity in order to pursue it. But there's a big problem we all face in our families, in society, and at work. And that is that a lot of people are not behaving in a highly curious way. And there's a good reason why. So let's think about it. When babies are born, they are these, you know, happy, robust, most of the time, happy, robust babies that are just super, super curious. I mean, that is the way kids are. They're always experimenting. They're always trying to solve problems. And they're actually really good at solving problems at that age. What happens is we get into schools, we have parents that are well-intended, we have bosses that are well-intended, maybe, and they drum curiosity out of us. It becomes bad to be curious. So it doesn't feel good to be told either explicitly or implicitly through body language and tone and other things that it's not safe to be curious. But a lot of people get curiosity drummed out of them. So in the workplace, as leaders, our job is to reignite that curiosity that we need everyone to have. And fear will make curiosity just go away. You know, if there's fear in the organization, who's going to want to be curious? It's not safe to be curious. So part of what we have to do, you know, back to beautiful W. Edwards Deming and his, you know, banish fear from the workplace. Absolutely. You can't get any level of clarity if you have fear in the workplace. So it sucks to not have clarity, and it sucks to not be able to be curious. Now, it wasn't just our well-intentioned bosses, teachers, and parents that did something to us. Society also has not valued curiosity. What is this saying, or what is this picture representing? The saying, curiosity killed the cat. You know, that is a subtle message, but it was, you know, a very, very popular phrase back in the day, and still is somewhat popular. That's not, you know, putting a very good message out there. And same with Curious George. What happened with Curious George? He got himself into trouble all the time for being curious. And the only way out of it was having the man with the yellow hat rescue him. And so that's not a good message. And it goes on and on. Like, you'll see this everywhere. You look, that curiosity is not rewarded. And we have to make it, we have to shift it. We have to pivot from that thinking and make it so that curiosity is rewarded. The other thing that's critical in order to have high degrees of clarity, both as an information provider and an information recipient, is to become very self-aware about our cognitive biases. So this is not a webinar on, you know, how to get self-aware, but you've got to quiet the mind. Ultimately, there's all kinds of ways to do that through walking meditation, actual meditation, massages back in the pre-COVID days when we could get a massage. All those things help quiet the mind so that we can become more self-aware. There are now 180 plus cognitive biases that have been identified. That's a lot of bias. And the other important way to confront biases and make sure you are aware that you're operating with one is to have others note it. You know, you can have a partner, you can have your own work team say, you know, if I'm operating with a bias, let me know. And you can just start having that kind of awareness. So, you know, the other thing we have to confront in order to have clarity is to not have assumptions and not leap into places that we aren't there. So what does this sentence say? Probably most of you say it says jumping to conclusions, or does it? So, you know, becoming aware of how we assume things and just starting to pay attention to these things. All of this drags down the level or the ability to have clarity. Fear, I mentioned before, you know, this is one of those things where it is really insidious in organizations. And you might be sitting there, if you're, you know, in an organization where you're a leader, you might be saying, like, there's no fear here. You know what? Every single client we work with, every single one, we start probing pretty early on in the engagement about the degree of fear. And pretty much every single leadership team without fail believes that there is not any fear in the organization. And when we start working with the front lines and middle managers, we find almost immediately there is a high degree of fear. And so, you know, just deal with it, like confront it, get the elephant in the room out there and start figuring out the root causes of the fear that people have. Some of it is the baggage they bring in, and it may not be legit in your organization or under your leadership, but a lot of it is legit. There are subtle and implicit things that happen that make people believe it's not safe to surface a problem. It's not safe to question a policy. It's not safe to ask, well, why are we doing that? You know, those kinds of things are insidious and dangerous. We have to work really, really hard to bring clarity to the surface. So we have 3 different clarity types. I've identified these 3, and they flip from situation to situation, so you're not purely all one or all the other in all situations. So the clarity pursuer is where you'd like to reside. Clarity pursuer is constantly asking for clarity and not taking action until they get it. And they're constantly aware of or at least checking on the clarity of what they're communicating in emails, on the phone, you know, interactions with people, just constantly checking that. The clarity avoider is the most dangerous place to be. And that, you know, the type 1 clarity avoidance, where it's intentional deceit, is of course almost sociopathic. Maybe not almost, maybe sociopathic, but it's the dangerous one. The willful ignorance, type 3, is one that is a self-awareness can help surface that, but willful ignorance can be, as you know, everything from, you know, I don't want to know if we're not complying with that policy or that statute or that law. I kind of don't want to know because then it'll be messy and I'll have to fix it. You know, in your personal lives, it could be like, I kind of don't want to know if my loved one has a crush on someone because then I have to deal with it. You know, it's those kinds of things. Strategic ambiguities in the middle of those two. And I think wisely used and with the right spirit and right intention used, it can be a really important thing. So for example, if a company is about to be acquired or they're about to acquire, you know, you don't want that on the street until it's the right time to message that to the world and telegraph that to the world. So there is a time and a place for choosing when you announce things, for example, and that strategic ambiguity might mean that you answer questions a little less directly, but it has to be very, very rarely used and for very, very important and intentional reasons, not a habit. And sometimes people become strategically ambiguous as a habit. And then clarity blind, or you know, either people that just aren't even aware the value that clarity brings and that it's even important, or they're aware of it, but they don't perceive when they're not in the presence of clarity yet until they become a little more practiced at detecting ambiguity and detecting clarity and the difference between those two. So how does this relate to lean? Well, lean, as I mentioned in the beginning, lean management practices really are a great exercise to build clarity muscles and to have that become habitual in the way you operate. And it does require some comfort with clarity, comfort to see things. So it's everything from strategy deployment and making the priorities of the organization visible and tangible for everyone, and that incredible clarity that comes from everyone knowing what the most important actions are they're going to be taken in a period of time, often a fiscal year. That level of clarity is very liberating because it keeps people from going off and wasting resources on other things that don't really matter. It keeps people aligned with what they can do to support the next level and the next level in the organization and all those things. So clarity around what the strategy is and how you're going, what actions you're taking in this fiscal year toward that strategy is critical. Daily management systems, having daily huddle boards that start bringing to the surface all the little annoying problems that arise throughout the day, and providing that level of clarity then provides the way to accelerate problem solving through those cycles. Standard work, very visual. It shouldn't be just a bunch of words on a page. It should be very visual. That level of clarity helps tremendously in process management. Gemba orientation, there is nothing that gets you more clear about life than going to where the work is done and seeing it firsthand, and that includes going to customers. Visual management, 5S and Kanban, all those kind of lumped together with great cues for what needs to happen or what is happening. So anything from and-on lights to color coding to error prevention techniques, where you're able to detect errors immediately when they happen. All of those kind of fall along. Value stream mapping. I mean, most of the time when we do a fair amount of value stream mapping work as part of, not solely, but as part of value stream transformation. And I just love when you have a group of senior leaders, is typically who should be doing value stream mapping. It's strategic, not tactical. And they light up, like every leader lights up multiple times during that time together when you're mapping, going, I had no idea. Now I understand. That kind of, even if it's awful news, even if it's like, oh God, we're not delivering anywhere near with the quality I thought we were, or now I understand why it sits for 3 days. It's not people not doing, the people working hard. It's some kind of work system design issue that's causing that delay, etc. So all of these things help bring clarity to the workplace, but it's also why people resist them. So you have to kind of put 2 and 2 together. So in Clarity First, the deeper dive, I divided it into the 5 Ps. And yesterday on LinkedIn, someone kind of dissed, I had the slide up on LinkedIn, and someone dissed me a little bit and said, like, where's the people? People's the most important one. Of course they are, absolutely. And people was laced all the way through the book. I don't, it's not really an area that I think that we should, like, we have to force people to be clear. We have to force, like, it's just, people and clarity go along with all of these 5. So it's It's expected and part of this. So let's take them one at a time. Purpose. Most organizations that we work with, at least, are not clear about their purpose. And purpose isn't something you manufacture. Purpose existed the minute the company was formed or the organization was formed. Purpose may have morphed over time, but it isn't something you have to create. Purpose is already there. So purpose is, why do you do what you do? It doesn't matter whether you're a government agency, a manufacturer, a financial services firm, healthcare, energy. I mean, it does not matter what you do. Purpose is about, why do you do it? And it's not about making money. It's another, much deeper why. By getting clear on this and connecting everyone in the organization to it, it is just very, very liberating. And you align people and build loyalty because people have a connection to a stronger, a higher purpose. And when you mine for the purpose, which is, again, it's already there, you can start with more of the mission. Like, what do you do? Our mission is to produce blah, blah, blah. And then the question is, well, what do you really do? Meaning, what problem are you solving with that particular product, whether it's a good or a service? What problem are you solving? Okay, now why are you solving that problem and not another problem? Why are you doing that? That's where it gets really powerful. And I meet with executive teams all the time where they cannot answer the question initially. And it's dangerous to be operating where you're not tied into the real reason why the organization exists. Raison d'etre is a very important thing. So you really do have to dig into this. If you haven't, do it. I mean, I work with manufacturers all the time that keep defining their purpose in product terms. It's not about product. It's about something usually emotional that product does. Even if it's an industrial product, there's something either making work safer or easier, or there's something about it. I'm not going to get into all the the details because this is really fun work. I like doing this, but it's important. All right, the next one, priorities. You got to be clear on your priorities. Strategy deployment is designed to do exactly that. Strategy deployment to me is nothing more nor nothing less than a focusing exercise, because you're prioritizing, and a time management exercise. You've got limited resources, you've got limited time. What should you be spending your resources and time on? That's the key to this whole thing. And so if you don't use strategy deployment, I urge you to look into it. And you have to get clear on your strategy first. You have to have a strategy to deploy. But then every fiscal year, or you can start mid-year, you put this plan together of which gaps need to be closed. Why are you not where you want to be right now? What is that gap? And what do you need to do to start closing that gap? Setting targets, setting actions, problems to be solved, etc., helps you get toward your strategy. And it's, again, clarity across the whole organization, because if you do it properly, you're playing catch ball, ideally, eventually, all the way to the front lines. And catch ball isn't just people nodding. It's an active conversation about priorities at all levels. That gives you the clarity and the alignment that you need to go forward. So what strategy deployment does is there's like the ambiguity is like, oh, there's stuff we could do. There's so much, and it's many good ideas to be executed, but you can't do them all at once. So the power of strategy deployment is getting a really well-developed muscle in saying either no, or more commonly, not yet. Yes, important, but not yet. We're going to work on these things. And so, you have to make sure you're not going to the buffet table and taking in all this food and piling your plate up high, and then you eat it all or try to eat it all, and what happens? You get sick. You need to be thoughtful about how much your organization can actually take on and do a good job. So relevant few, relevant few, relevant few. Process. So this is a big one. I'm going to just do a really high level thing to get you thinking. Current state value stream maps are so powerful for people seeing where they reside in a work system and seeing how they relate to a customer, seeing the relationships. And most of the time when we enter into an organization that has not done value stream work, there's just high degrees of siloed thinking and siloed behaviors, that this begins the process of looking at it as a work system and looking at not just sub-optimizing one area, but rather connecting everything together. And so from a clarity generation perspective, you know, a value stream work is probably my most, as a practice, it's probably my favorite practice to do with an organization who hasn't experienced it before, ideally, because it is just so powerful when people see the truth about the current state. It's so much easier to decide what to do about it when you're super clear on what it is that you're dealing with. So standard work, work instructions, job aids, everything under the umbrella of standard work, and also includes leadership standard work, leader standard work as well, you know, is a clarifying exercise in and of itself. And so, you know, to the degree that an organization doesn't have visual standard work in place, I can tell immediately that they have a fair amount of ambiguity around and probably aren't performing anywhere near as well as they can be and should be. So standard work is a great visual aid for getting clarity, achieving clarity. You know, the whole emphasis on making problems visible, again, you got to work on fear and getting fear out of the equation, but then it takes actual process design to make problems visible. I posted something on LinkedIn, I think it was last week, asking people to give examples of their most creative ways that they've made problems visible. There's, I think, maybe one out of a lot of comments that is actually answering that question. What's the most creative way you've made a problem visible? The rest of it was like, you know, using KPIs and, you know, I'm talking about process design. Like, what specifically did you do in process design that allowed a problem to be made visible so it can be detected like that? KPIs will show, you know, trends and patterns and things like that. I'm talking about the work output and the quality of that output and making problems in the output visible. So challenge you to think a little bit about that. Clear processes, you know, if you want to follow the whole clarity, you know, mantra, they need to be, you know, first designed and defined. Then they need to be documented, they need to be current, they need to be adhered to or followed, they need to be monitored, and they need to be constantly going through improvement cycles. Most organizations don't do any number of these, and sometimes all 5 of these are not being done. And, you know, it's really interesting to me because I'm a process chick, and, you know, I'm like, why would you not have written processes? It's just so fascinating to see how many organizations try to just use, you know, this verbal communication and tribal knowledge to get work done consistently and meet standards. And it's like, wow, how does that happen? Well, it doesn't. And so clarity is important with process design, as most of you probably are aware. And then finally, performance, or not finally, but performance. So performance is really interesting. You know, we've been working with well, we're doing all virtual work right now, and we've been working with some new clients where the middle managers are less sophisticated with measurement in general. And 100% of all of the examples I've seen so far have been tables of numbers, like no line charts, no bar charts, no pie charts. I'm not a big pie chart fan, but you know, it's better than a bunch of numbers. And so it's just like, you know, you can't get clear about what's really happening, especially if you have something along a timeline and you want to look at performance over time. If you just have a chart, even if you color code them red and green, that doesn't give you context the way you need context. You need to have visualization of data in order for people to understand the data. And if you don't understand the data, then why collect it? So it's very important. And, you know, I see a lot of organizations that are still, even though lean's been around since the late 80s, you know, or actually probably the late 90s. Well, you know, it actually began with W. Edwards Deming and TWI, or just-in-time work and TWI and all those things. But anyway, so, you know, we see a lot of work teams that have no idea how they're actually performing as a team. We see a lot of divisions, a lot of business units, a lot of companies. And so it's like going to a soccer, AKA football game, you know, and the scoreboard's out and you're trying to follow and you're trying to hold in your head who has what score and who has, you know, where everyone is and who has what penalties and everything. you just get so much more clarity, and you know what to do. You know who to root for. When you have that kind of performance evidence on a wall or on a computer screen for everyone to see. So, it's critical. Having a company-wide dashboard of some sort or scorecard is critical to decide, to help people stay focused on moving the needle. Which KPIs are the most relevant for the organization this year, and what's the target, and where are we? And actively huddling around these boards and actively problem solving as a result of the evidence that the data is giving you. So again, you got to do this to be clear about what performance is, and it can't be hidden. It needs to be very, very accessible for all to see in one way, shape, or form. And in work from home in COVID times, in a computer, much of the time. Another thing is, just getting, having an intentional development goal that some people are going to get really, really good at visualizing data. So we see organizations struggling with staffing to demand and capacity issues all the time, and they just don't have the means to be able to see the truth about the current state. And so this one, the green bars this happens to be healthcare. These are patients arriving, arriving at 5:15 a.m. for free clinic. And then the blue bars are when the physicians actually arrive, and the red line is when they were scheduled to arrive. And you immediately see, some major disconnects here, where you've got a whole lot of doctors occupying a lot of salary where you don't have patient demand, and you've got a whole lot of patients queuing up because the doctors aren't scheduled at 5:15 in the morning. And there's all kinds of ways to solve this problem, and it's not necessarily just moving the doctors up, but you got to have the clarity around the truth of the current state in order to even begin to do something about the problem and close that gap. So visualizing data is a skill to be developed. Lastly, problem solving. So making problems visible in the first place is the key, but then having active problem solving at the Gemba, and it's your go-to position always and forever, to just the minute a gap appears, assuming it's a high priority gap, you solve it by going to where the work is done and engaging the people that do the work. And this is a real-time problem solving session with a client we were working with in Bangkok. And they were really, really good at just immediately getting to the Gemba the minute something surfaced. This happened to be a logistics issue. And making that forces you to become clear. The more problem solving you do, the more you'll see either you're operating with ambiguity or clarity, because problem solving will be either easier or more difficult because of it. So clarity is a requirement. What I did, I don't want to go into all the details here because it's in both the Outstanding Organization and in Clarity First. More detail in Clarity First is, PDSA and PDCA the terms are very ambiguous, and the word plan especially is very ambiguous on what you're actually doing. So I said, all right, enough of this. I'm going to figure out a way to help people understand what P actually is. And then it carried on into DCA or DSA. And, what are the key questions that should be answered in each of those sections? So this question-based model has been working so well that I give clients an option always on whether they get this with or without PDC or PDSA or even DMAIC or even TBP, Toyota Business Practices, or 8D mapped to this. And 90% of them say they want just the questions. So it's interesting, it's interesting to see where people, the freedom that people are feeling and the liberation from questions. A3 reports as a coaching aid and a communication aid for problem solving is another great way to get clarity on what's actually happening. Not what we think is happening, not what we wish is happening, but what is happening in a problem and the problem solving cycle. We're big fans of A3 reports. We are big fans in A3 reports being used properly, which means that they're coaching aids first and foremost. They're not done retrospectively to document a problem-solving cycle. No, 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 no. But it's a wonderful clarification tool. DMS, daily management systems, and the degree of visualization that happens in a well-designed and well-executed DMS huddle in the morning is just it's just worth so much. And the more that things are brought to the surface that are problems, the more you can actually address them. So finally, I just want to talk a few minutes about you. So we talked a lot about organizational and lean practices that are organizational level, but every single person kind of needs to make the commitment to clarity, and then you need to help each other. So I'm a big believer in creating a clarity culture where it's regularly said by someone, I don't think you're being clear there. And you can even make it be a joke, I mean, not a joke, but you can make a lighthearted thing. It doesn't have to be, you're not being clear. It can be something like, I don't hear clarity, or something like that to get people sensitized to what their habits are. And then they can start, actively deciding not to continue with that habit and to form a new habit, which is one communicating with clarity. As an information receiver, just becoming more diligent in not moving forward until you get clarity. I meet with people all the time. They're scared to death to ask their boss a clarifying question when they're given a project. I'm like, that's not good. You have to clarify, because what if you spend all your time doing something that's not what he or she meant? You got to clarify. And if the relationship is that fractured that a person just is stymied with asking for clarification from someone that's giving them something to do, it's a very big red flag, and a candid conversation is absolutely needed about that. So take that and then do with it whatever you'd like. The other thing I'll mention is the value of taking a clarity pause throughout the day. So, before you reply to the email, before you pick up the phone to make the call, before you walk into the meeting, before you click on Zoom, whatever it is, you're just taking a pause and just cleansing yourself of whatever you just walked out of, and centering, and then walking into whatever you're walking into has so many benefits. So, and taking time for yourself between things, and scheduling your calls for 50 minutes and taking that 10-minute break between calls. There's all kinds of things that you can do that will allow you to be much more of a good receiver of information and a good provider of information, so you can help raise the bar on clarity. So everyone is obligated. Everyone benefits. There's no downside to clarity other than dealing with the truth. But if we don't deal with the truth, we're dead. So it's something that you've got to do. Lean management is, in my view, just the most elegant, beautiful management system that we've ever seen. And it lights the path to excellence if you decide to take the path. You can't not become excellent if you do it seriously and really take all of it to heart and don't just cherry pick. But clarity is at the core of all of it. So you have to be ready and willing to seek and operate with clarity. And then you'll be very successful. You can have it all. Profit, people that they're banging down your door to work for you, customers that will never leave you, products that are just off the shelf great. We really can have it all. To think otherwise is short-sighted. So thank you so much. I can't wait to take your questions. Here's all kinds of ways you can contact us. I mentioned Leader Standard Work. Our next course is launching next week for the Academy, and it is Leader Standard Work, and we've taken an incredibly different approach to Leader Standard Work than what has been done in the Lean community so far. So it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is to that, but we're finding great success with it at our clients. So I'm eager to take your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Lots of good, insightful things there, and certainly it's. I've been scribbling down on a piece of paper all sorts of thoughts going through. So what we're going to do now is have a little time for some questions. So if you'd like to go to your questions tab On the right-hand side, you've got a white arrow on a red background. So if you type in any questions that you've got there, and Karen, I'm sure will be able to answer them. We have one that came through during your talk, which was from Jesse, who wanted to know the name of the Japanese professor. I don't know if this was a hard test for you as well to pronounce.
Yeah, let me go back to that slide. It's probably the easiest. Akiyoshi is his first name, but I can't remember his last name. Kitaoka. Akiyoshi Kitaoka. I'm happy to send a PDF. I don't know if you do that with people, and this is hyperlinked on it. And if you put him in Google, I mean, he's all over the place. So he's a pretty famous professor for optical illusions.
Okay. Okay. All right.
A moving snake one that I particularly like. It's it's just static geometric figures, but it's like the snake is moving. It's very cool.
Okay. Well, Jesse, if you want to know the exact spelling, just send an email through to Emma, and we'll forward it to Karen and put you in touch, and you can get that reference.
Can you see it down here in the lower right on the slide?
No, it's sort of too low, so we can't quite see that. Yeah.
Akiyoshi, Akiyoshi, and then last name is Kitaoka. I hope I'm saying that right. Kitaoka.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much.
See that, sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, we couldn't quite, well, I certainly can't see it on my screen. Okay, we've got a few questions coming in. Making problems visible, how do you implement this process?
Yes, so it's during process design that you are looking at the work and evaluating where errors are being made and root causes for them. And then, it's very situational depending on the root cause for them. It's a lot easier to error-proof with machinery than it is for humans that are thinking and doing, data work and that type of thing. But it's not impossible. With true poka-yoke, you are making it impossible to make the error through fittings and, physical adjustments to machinery in the workplace and all that. With data, it's, you can do things electronically. Like, for example, instead of having free text, which can be fraught with errors, you can have a drop-down designed that limits choices. Now, they can still pick the wrong drop-down. You can have things like, you'll notice if you order something from Amazon or something like that, if you forget to put your address in, you get a big red, you forgot to put your address in. Those kinds of things, it's very situational depending on the process, on how you do it.
Okay, very good. So I'll invite people, your earlier question was, did anyone have any ideas of how you could make problems visible? So if anyone's got any thoughts, type those in.
Yeah.
I had one in that realm. I don't know if this counts. I'm a bit scared about you shoot everyone down on these things, but let me give you this one. One I quite liked was a company that I did some work with. They took machines that were like 40, 50 years old, and it was heavy industry. So it was dirty, smelly, grimy industry. And when they got the machines up to a certain level, so they did, 5S and TPM and all the sort of usual stuff, they painted them white.
Yeah.
And it made problems, any leak, any problem, it was a great way of making problems visible. Yeah. And they had many visitors came around saying, well, this is heavy industry. You're absolutely crazy making the machines white. And they say, well, within minutes, we can see the problems. So that was a good example, was it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. We launched our 5S course, the last course we launched, and we have an animated white, a machine getting painted from gray to white, because we suggested at all of our clients. And some of them are like, oh, no way, we don't want to know. Yeah. And some of them are like, yeah, why wouldn't you? It's brilliant.
Yeah, and in the same way, if you go around a Honda factory, all the people on the shop floor have white uniforms for exactly the same sort of reason. If it's covered in oil, why is it covered in oil? Yeah. Okay, we've got a few questions coming through. So Andres has actually spelt out the name of the Japanese professor. So if you're looking questions, if you wanna grab that, he's done that. So one from Kevin here. How would you convince executives in a business that this is a culture change and not a 5-minute win?
Say it's a culture change and not a 5-minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you start with that, and you know, it's interesting. What we have to do is always go to root cause for resistance and root cause for misunderstanding. And I always ask where someone learned about lean, you know, how much they've read about lean, if they've had other consulting firms in, which firms, because we know which ones tend to be a little more cookie cutter and superficial, and which ones do a really good job of introducing an organization to lean. I always want to find out where they're coming from, and then I know how to counter a lot more effectively whatever their resistance is. And so, you know, we pretty much now are always at the executive level, and then we, you know, work across the organization. Whereas in my 25 years ago, and actually 2000, when I started with lean, I'd get brought in by director level and wouldn't have access to C levels. And now it's almost always, you know, C level beginning. And so we sit down and have that conversation of, look, this isn't just process design. It's not just industrial engineering. It's not just, you know, DMS. You know, some people think that they're going to stand up daily management systems and all will be well in the world. No, it will not. It's an important component, but it's only one of many, many components. So we just start by educating and making sure that they understand what lean really is. And then, you know, choose where to start. I don't believe in one exact starting point either. I think that it's very situational where to start with a lean journey.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming through. The next one is, I'm hesitating, it's Egidius, I think. Egidius, hopefully I've pronounced your name right. And Egidius asks, would you agree that clarity should be customer orientated, not the department or process oriented in the first place?
Well, I believe that it's all about delivering value to customers, and getting clear on what customers value is absolutely essential. And so everything else, you know, kind of is in service of that, if that's what the question is. But it's not, you know, it's not just that. It's being able to deliver that value in effective, efficient, and safe ways. And you have to get clear about process in that case. And you know, it's being able to see problems as gaps are appearing, so that you can resolve them and things like that. So I think that's what the question probably means, is like, isn't the customer the core of everything? And yes, absolutely yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see it implicit in your sort of purpose and priority side, that the value for the customer would be in there, and designing the processes and so forth. Yeah. Okay, good. So Colin, is more of an observation. Have you seen white carpet in a ship's engine room?
I have not, but I think I like it. Although I don't know if I want carpet versus cement. How about white cement? Painted cement.
Carpet might not be so easy to clean.
Like carpet in the bathroom. Hopefully, I'm not offending anyone, but like, no carpet in the bathroom.
All right, thank you, Colin, for that. So one from Kevin here. Do you find it more difficult in office environment rather than a factory?
For clarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, going around a factory, it's easy to see what's going on, but in an office, sometimes you can't see it.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have to make the invisible visible in an office, for sure. Yeah, so I thought maybe he was asking about more of the culture, because I do think that offices get kind of mired up in politics a little more easily than manufacturers on the front, especially on the plant floor. There's always politics everywhere, but I think that heavy office environments have that, and it does make ambiguity more common when you have a lot of politics, because politics by nature isn't being clear. Maybe not by nature, but there's a lot of ambiguity when you have a heavy political environment.
Sure.
So, but yes, I think that, you know, we work a lot in all industries, and the office side of things and making problems visible is more challenging, for sure, but not impossible.
Right. Okay, couple more questions. So one from Erin here. Is there an order in bringing the 5 Ps in an organization that works best?
I think of it as a jigsaw puzzle and lattice work. When given the option, we always start with purpose because that drives everything else. They are somewhat serialized in terms of, first you start with, knowing what you need to do process-wise, and then you measure performance, and then you problem solve. So they're somewhat serialized, but in introducing them to an organization, no, we don't have one. So for example, sometimes we go in and suggest strategy deployment from the beginning. Sometimes it's 3 years into an engagement with the client that we say, okay, now you're ready. Because it's just difficult to start with strategy deployment if you're not very mature with thinking through problem solving and all the other things that make strategy deployment work well. If their culture, if they're very command and control, catch ball is going to make them go, and so you have to kind of ease them into playing catch ball instead of it being top down. So things like that, it's very situational as far as the maturity of the leadership team and the organization.
Okay, very good. Right, question from Stephen here. If a company is not clear other than making money about why it exists, what thinking and techniques does TKMG apply to help?
So it's always interesting to hear that, and I always wonder, is that true across the whole leadership team, or is it true with the loudest voices on the leadership team? If it's privately held company, is it true of the owners? If it's a public company, is it true for the board as well as the leadership team, the internal leadership team? So I like to understand how widespread that belief is that they're in business to make money. We won't work for a company if we hear that vibe from the beginning in our early calls with the company, that if they really truly believe that this is all about making money, we're not a good fit at all, because we very much believe that profit is a byproduct of all else, and it's an outcome of really good everything else. And so if they're viewing money as the goal versus the outcome, we're not for them. So
okay,
don't hire me.
Okay, right, we have a question from Pedro here. So Karen, is it possible to have clarity in organizational politics?
Well, you have to work hard. And so one of the things that we did, it was a really fun engagement with a technology firm, and they were growing very, very fast, and they were exponentially introducing politics into the environment because they were growing fast, and they didn't take the time to clarify roles and responsibilities because they were moving really fast. And so we went in, and that was one of the first things. I'm a scientist. I didn't really say that, but my early career before I got into business performance improvement was a scientist. And so I'm a really good diagnostician, I think. And I smelled immediately that their problem was, the root cause of it was that they just didn't have clear roles and responsibilities. So everyone was operating with ambiguity, and then that created all this, well, you need to see Joe about that. Well, you need to see Sally. Oh no, Betty won't approve that. And all that muck kind of came out of lack of clarity on who's responsible for what, who's ultimately accountable for what part of the business. And so we went through an exercise to clarify all that. And even the front line said that the amount of politics seemed to reduce by about 50% from that engagement. We didn't stay with them long term, but I think that's often a place to start.
Okay. I think what I'll do is perhaps we'll cap the questions. We'll take the ones we've already got, but perhaps we'll put a cap on any new ones coming in, just time-wise. So Ramaswamy S, he's actually asking whether he missed the beginning. So are we recording this? We are. We'll send you links through, so you'll be able to look at that again. He also is interested to know on your view on whether Lean and Six Sigma overlap, and could you give any examples of that overlap and how that might work?
This is not the forum for that discussion. You can read. I have a lot of things that I've written about Lean and Six Sigma. I will say this, and it'll probably begin a firestorm. I believe that they are extremely different philosophies at their core. And I think it's very difficult to have two extremely different philosophies coexist and get the benefit of either one of them. I'll say that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So we'll just take two more. So one from John here. Interesting one with my background. Have you worked with any university executive teams? And if so, what did you find were the main obstacles to clarity?
So I didn't work with them as a consultant, but I've taught in universities for a while, quite a few different ones, and so I'm pretty familiar with what goes on there. You know, it really isn't. So one of the things that's interesting about all the work we do is I find more and more, the more we have different experiences with different industries, how similar the needs and the problems are. And so with the university setting, you know, I mean, I can rank politics by industry. It's one of the higher ones with politics, but it's not by any means, and that doesn't mean other ones are political free. It's just like people are people, really. Human beings all have the same needs, wants, and desires. And, you know, it's when you get with people and you're able to help them tap into what makes their workday go well and what doesn't, and you start finding a way to eliminate the kinds of stress that leadership has, then that opens up their mind to clarity, because they don't, until you get in a clear environment, you don't know you're not in it. You know, it's like a fish in water. You know, the fish isn't saying, I'm in water, I'm in water, I'm in water. No, they're not. And so suddenly when you're out of water, you're like, I need water. And so, you know, it's being exposed to what the world is like in a clear environment helps people want more of it. So I really don't think university settings are remarkably different than other industries in terms of their needs and the ways to bring clarity to them are, you know, through the 5 Ps. So, yeah.
I find it interesting because having spent half my life working in a university, and we actually in 2006 launched the Lean University program at the university, which was right from the head of the university, and if you like, the number 2 was the senior executive championing it. And I would, in your ranking, I put applying Lean into universities in the top 3 difficult sectors. So university, military, and hospitals I find are probably the most difficult areas. I'm not quite sure how the clarity fits in. I have to think about that one.
Well, and I think they're difficult for different reasons. You know, in healthcare, which I've spent a lot of my time, my early career was in healthcare. I think it's the complexity of the work environment that makes it really hard, as well as the financial. I mean, if you follow the money in healthcare, you know why it's messed up. And it's difficult to change the money stream. And when you don't have a clear customer-supplier relationship, it just makes satisfying a customer that much more difficult. So it's a very complex environment, and that's why the military, you know, I think that's more of a culture issue that's harder to break through that very traditional command and control kind of thinking, and also very complex. Universities, I mean, everything's complex, but universities, I think, are less complex, but more riddled with, you know, this is the way we've always done it, and traditional thinking. And, you know, it's not the bastion of innovation typically. And so it's just, I think, harder to open the hearts and minds of people that are used to doing things one way into alternative ways. But you know what I've always found? Ask people what is painful for them, and you've got yourself a conversation. Sure. You know, people don't like pain. Why should they? And so if you can just tap into, you know, I was this group I was just working with, like they were being really quiet at the beginning of the call, and all I had to do was say, what's painful in this value stream? And you know, so people want pain to go away, and always remember that people want pain to go away.
I think my experience in the university environment is that the administrative staff, you can actually do lean quite well with them, because they're usually quite frustrated with all the sort of slow moving and committees and all that sort of thing. And the academic staff is really difficult, because fundamentally they only have one KPI, and their KPI is their academic papers that they write. So actually that's all they're interested in, and they're not interested in anything else, and they're interested in blaming everyone else that nothing else works, and they don't want people stealing their money or anything like that. So actually it's how you manage is actually the major problem, I think, in universities.
Well, yeah, you're tapping into something that it just is a big annoyance of mine, that so many universities are really not at all focused on the student. It's about papers and research funds, and that's just wrong. On so many levels. And so, yeah, I think educational reform will happen. I think COVID might accelerate it. But I mean, even curriculum design is so archaically done in universities. And universities, historically have always lagged behind industry needs, always.
Yeah.
And so, it's just more industry university partnerships would help in that regard. But anyway, it's hard. I feel for you, Peter.
Okay, I'm going to link on to the very last question from Kevin, which actually touches on what you were just saying. So you mentioned the COVID word. So he's sort of saying, have you found the new way of working with clarity in the COVID environment, and what seem to be the biggest issues that you found with that?
I think that we're getting better. I mean, I definitely see tremendous progress in how people are behaving now. Like, I'm on 6 to 8 Zoom meetings a day. And, back in end of March, it was so painful, and people didn't know how to use a webcam, and their kids and their dogs are barking, and the kids are screaming. And, it was just really chaotic in the beginning, because people were trying to figure it all out. I think now, I think my meetings now are every bit as effective as they were in person, with the exception of one key thing, and it will never, you'll never be able to get this on a webcam. If you have 8 people in a meeting and you're on the grid looking at all the 8 people, and you're also trying to connect with them, like I'm looking right at the camera right now. Well, if I go down and start looking at the people, I've lost connection with you. But I need to see the people's body language, but then I lose connection, and so there's that dynamic of going back and forth, because you need to see body language. And so as a facilitator, that is the biggest miss I have. Like, I could be in a room with 8 people and my radar's going and I'm sensing everything. I feel it, I see it, I hear it, I sometimes smell it, like you can really get everything that you can't get on a webcam. It's a very flat medium to pick up on all these cues that are important in communication. So I think it's a little harder to get clarity, and you have to ask a lot of questions that you might not have to ask in person. That's the one thing I ask a lot more clarifying questions, because I can't see body language the way I used to.
Okay, thank you very much. We've overrun by a few minutes, but I think there were some interesting questions, so it's good to take those. So well, thank you very much, Karen. Very thought-provoking, lots of interesting discussions there, and I've got my page of ideas and notes for all sorts of things connected with this, so that's fantastic for me. So I'm going to hand back to Emma to just close us down for the session.
Yes, thank you, Peter, and thank you very much, Karen, for an excellent webinar. Just a few follow-up points. So tomorrow you will receive an email which will also actually contain the webinar recording, and this will also be uploaded to our website by tomorrow. And on there as well, you actually have now a e-certificate which shows that you've attended Karen Martin's webinar by the Enterprise Excellence Network. So that's for you to take away as well. If you have any questions or would like to attend any of our further webinars, you can sign up via our website or just email me. So all of those will be in the follow-up email, along with some feedback, which we really do appreciate. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Karen.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for all the logistics work you did also.
My pleasure.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.